Hi, I'm Adric, and I want to share with you some takeaways from my past decade building product. I started here in Silicon Valley with software startups. When I think of rallying engineers, I still really draw from that experience. I then went into a different context of building real-life communities with amazing people. This taught me how important relationships are and how they form. I then consulted with a number of small and medium-sized technology companies where I really got to see what was working best out in the wild. In my latest role as Chief Product Officer at a semiconductor design startup, I've put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, as has my co-founder, into understanding and testing how to get buy-in. Now, firstly, I want to thank the Product-Led Alliance in inviting me to speak today and for making this event possible, even in the middle of this global crisis. If you're watching during the conference, then we're all part of a big Slack channel together. So I'm there in real time answering questions. Please jump right in. My talk is fundamentally about buy-in. In a startup context, how do you get investors to obsess over you? In a company context, how do you breach that excitement threshold such that teams rally around your vision? Something that really catalyzed my search for this was a couple of years ago. My co-founder and I had huge orders, we had great technology, an amazing team, everything that you're told you need, and yet we still weren't getting the investment that we were looking for the next round. So we did a deep dive. We looked at what had worked well for us in the past, and we also visited a bunch of other founders to understand what was working well for them. Even if the startup was a bust or if the product was a flop, our question was still, how did it get funded? How did it get greenlit? What we found was that regardless of what they were building, whether it was cutting-edge biotechnology or vegan dog food or consumer hardware or software tools or art or perfume or crypto apps or whatever it was, the fundamental ingredients for getting support were the same. As we go through those, I invite you to consider what the challenges are you're facing in getting support for your product, your idea, your mission. If you're comfortable, please share them in the Slack channel, and we have this amazing audience of product expertise. Let's put that brain trust to work and help you. Some examples that people have shared in the past are, a team's building an augmented reality board game, and their challenge is how to get enough backers on Kickstarter. Somebody else is a product lead at a huge consulting firm, and his challenge is how to get backing from his stakeholders to pursue this innovative vision he has. Another is a fintech startup CEO whose challenge is, how does she spend the seed funding she has so that she best advances the product and also lands the next round of investment from a whole new level of investor. So what did we find on our hunt for successes and failures? Now, I want to focus on a specific stage of product. There's a whole discipline to identifying the markets and finding value for the customer. That's really before this. And then after launch, there's a whole world of growth and growing the product that's really beyond the scope of what I'm going to talk about today. There are a ton of resources for both of these things. Right here, even at the conference, I invite you to check out some of the other speakers. So what about that critical phase in between? That step where You've identified the value, and now you need to rally allies in order to make it a reality. What do you do? Well, to get buy-in, we've identified 5 things. Number 1, sexy demo. The sexy demo is all about pulling people in. It needs to be tailored to resonate with the kind of audience you're trying to capture. Are you looking to hook investors or stakeholders or customers? Each of those is going to look a little different. Now, this is not about objective sexiness or only what you think is cool. This is about an emotional connection. This is your vision framed for a particular group that you want support from. A great example that I love, it came from OpenAI about a year ago. They launched a set of language tools to generate a language, and it was really cool, but didn't get a lot of attention until Adam King made a website called Talk to Transformer, where you generated entire amazing stories right in front of your eyes from simple inputs. Was it particularly useful? No, not really. Did it capture the imagination of the audience at that moment in time? Absolutely. That's a sexy demo. So how do you get one? Well, like anything, it's really an iterative process. Take those product skills you have and apply them where that backer you want support from is the customer. And the demo is your product, the proto product that unlocks the resources you need to make the real product. And this is different to a user research demo. You've already figured out what the value is to the user. Now you need to make that value resonate with the stakeholders. I'd love to hear in the Slack about make or break demos that you've had, and also how the demo ended up overlapping with the end product. Number 2, pedigree. If demos are all about attention, then pedigree is about belief. What's the track record of you and your team that assures somebody you're going to be successful, that what you've promised is possible? No one is more familiar with what you're working on than you are. That means that for those outside, vetting the people and the technology is tough, really tough. Any external validation that you can bring makes it way easier for them to vet you. Pedigree is a key piece of that. For example, a hard science startup was really struggling to find investment until they brought onto their team a Nobel laureate in that field. This totally overhauled the credibility of their product plan and made a big difference. It can be tough to know what level of background or credibility you need as the product lead versus how much you can rely on your team. What's important, though, is that the whole picture makes sense and somebody can have faith in the competencies of the key roles. There are a few ways to get pedigree. One of them, like the Nobel laureate example, is to bring it onto the team. Another, there's usually a lot of value to be gained by going through the narrative that you use for yourself and your team and finding out, well, how do I dial this more into my specific field? How do I show that this is credibility for what I'm working on? And the third way is sort of longer term, it's more strategic. Simply go out there and start accomplishing things. Build that pedigree. Now, of course, what you build the pedigree in has huge impact on what you can leverage it for later on. So how do we make sure that our message of pedigree resonates? How do we make sure that our sexy demo makes a big impact? Well, that brings me to number 3, charisma and magnetism. No matter what it is you're trying to accomplish, people are going to follow you based on how much they want to follow you. This is often thought of as something that only you're born with, or this was my childhood, so that's my charisma level. And I've fallen into that trap. One of the reasons that I started and have been involved with so many communities is that 10 years ago, I was incredibly shy. It was a real barrier to getting people gathered around stuff I was excited about. Magnetism is a huge differentiator in motivating people to work with you, people to back you, people to use your product. In the startup world of examples, I can't begin to list the number of offices we visited where we met the people, we toured the product, and we wondered, how did this get funded? Then a few minutes with the CEO, and you're like, wow, he or she is the guy, and you buy in. This is an amazing skill, and it can be fostered. So how do you get this? Well, maybe you're already there. Maybe this is a skill set you already have. Maybe you can bring somebody onto the team who has a lot of charisma. However, it's not as modular as Pedigree. Or you can work on it. Some books that I love are The Charisma Myth and Influence and How to Win Friends and Influence People. Someone asked me a great question about charisma as a tool, which was, well, am I creating some fake image because I feel that people are going to like it rather than staying true to myself? I don't think it has to be that way. Fundamentally, this is about connection. And it's way easier to connect when you show up authentically. Maybe that does look like showmanship and P.T. Barnum. Maybe it looks a lot more quiet and considered. Maybe it looks like something we've never seen before and is brand new. The point is that when you share that openly with people, it is a draw. Charisma is an amazing tool for creating those connections. However, it needs to be complemented with number 4, relationships. Relationships are everything. That's why it's called a company. Having that deep and meaningful relationship with a person who might back you is key. When somebody's looking at all this stuff, your sexy demo, your pedigree, your charisma, they're going to say, wow, all of this is so easy to vet because of how well I know that person. One example is we met with a founder who was working on a deep technology product. Long before, during his postdoc research, he'd published a paper and somebody more experienced in the field reached out to him. They ended up clicking and grew that relationship into a strong mentor-mentee bond. That mentor, along the line, actually exited his startup, went to his VCs and vouched for this guy, creating a new startup. That chain of relationships made it super easy to back him. Internal to a company, there's a whole web of trust and relationships that are playing out all of the time. The support you can get for your product really depends on the strength of those relationships and who can vouch for you. There's really no shortcut here. There is, however, a far-reaching version of relationships. Number 5, celebrity. Celebrity is powerful because attention is the new currency. Maybe you are a celebrity. Maybe you have millions of Instagram followers who you can market your product to. Maybe you're part of a company and that brand is the celebrity. Maybe your audience is internal and getting that star team member on board is what got you the green light. A perfect example of external celebrity is Oprah's book club. You get that endorsement and you're set. There are still, though, lots of small ways to leverage the idea of celebrity in order to improve the perception, attention, and credibility of your product. I put celebrity last partly because of how ephemeral it is, and partly because it often takes a lot of the other 4 things to get that celebrity on board. I want to take a moment to talk about balance. Do I need all of these 5 things all of the time? Well, everyone we spoke to had a really strong presence in at least 2 of them, and the others depended on how far along the project was. For example, a really common combination was pedigree and charisma. That's enough to roll up a whole bunch of new relationships and make something happen. Another common combination is sexy demo and relationships. Wow, let me support you right now because I love you and that demo resonated with me. The 5 things are incredibly effective at getting a product off the ground. Whether the backing you need is from investors, from internal stakeholders, or from customers. And yeah, it's going to look a little different depending on the audience. Rather than a formula to follow, the 5 things are really a lens through which to look at your product and identify there's an opportunity for us to get the buy-in we need.